Volodymyr Zelensky has signed a deal for Ukraine to obtain 100 Rafale fighter jets and other hardware from France. This as he seeks to boost his country's capacity to fight off the ongoing Russian invasion. We can see live images there of Volodymyr Zelensky arriving at the Élysée Palace, greeted by French President Emmanuel Macron. Macron, who met him a little earlier this Monday at a military airbase just outside of Paris, where Zelensky inspected the Rafale fighter jet, which was framed between the Ukrainian and French flags. The pair are also holding meetings now at the Élysée Palace this afternoon, where they'll sign a number of bilateral agreements. For more on this story, we can go to our guest this afternoon. We can go to a story that looks at why this visit by Zelensky comes at a crucial moment, and especially as the Russian army has said it's gained crucial military gains in the crucial strategic town of Pokrovsk recently and in the Zaporizhia region. For more on this visit, we can speak to Michael Benhamou, who's the executive director of the think tank OPEWI, Europe's War Institute. Thank you very much for speaking to us on France 24.
Thanks for the invitation.
At 100 Rafale jets, this is a huge order for Paris. They're very expensive. They cost around 100 million euros, I believe.
Approximately, yeah.
And they take several years to make as well. So where are these jets going to come from?
They will not be delivered immediately, probably, because Dassault Aviation, who produces the Rafale, they have a lot of orders coming from India, Indonesia, and also the Middle East. So these Rafale will probably come in 2029, 2030. But definitely this sale of 100 Rafale is going to, in a way, lock the relationship between France and Ukraine for at least a decade. This is what it means. And it's going to be quite difficult to actually question that decision because billions of euros are at stake, a lot of jobs in France. And lastly, on this, it's very good news for Dassault Aviation because it puts Dassault at the heart of the European defense ecosystem in terms of aviation technologies. So this is an important moment at the scale of France, of course, but also at the scale of Europe.
So what kind of impact would these jets have on the battlefield concretely, especially if they take a long time to arrive?
Very good question. I think right now we have a problem in Ukraine, which is that we cannot reach the rear of Russian forces, which can now operate rather freely with their drone systems and also with their artillery. So what is the rear? It's this area which is between 5 and, let's say, 30 kilometers behind combat lines. It's the reason why Russia is able to advance right now in Pokrovsk and in different areas all along the battle line. It's because Ukraine cannot contest this logistics rear. With Rafale, it might be possible to do that in the midterm.
But there would need to be training for pilots of these aircraft, right?
It takes years, definitely. As I said in the beginning, it will take approximately 10 to 15 years to actually consolidate the acquisition and then the training and then also the adjustment. Because once you have a system like that operating on the battlefield, usually the client is asking for modifications, and Ukraine will probably ask for improvements and modification given the intensity of the fight it is in with Russia. Russia, which is a country with high technological prowess. So this is going to be for Dassault and for France. It's a huge technological test. The Rafale has been tested, for example, between Pakistan in the quick war between Pakistan and India recently. But this is another level of battlefield tests for the Rafale, definitely.
All right, French President Emmanuel Macron and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky, they're just giving a press conference, giving some details about a series of deals that have been signed in Paris this Monday during Zelensky's visit. I'm joined on set by Michael Benhamou, who's the executive director of OPEWI, Europe's War Institute. We've been listening to that press conference. We heard a number of details emerge there. particularly about the deal that concerns the up to 100 Rafale fighter jets. What stood out about that to you?
I noted four things when we were together. First, that President Macron has gone a long way since 2022. He's now using a rhetoric, a semantic, which is close to the Ukrainians. He's saying that Russia is an imperial country, a cynical country, that Ukraine is part of the European family. So this is, in terms of shared values, this is a signal. Number two, about the reassurance force. Now in Mont-Valérien, this is official. Mont-Valérien is in the west of Paris. It's a little hill that has been refurbished over the past years. Now we know that there is a small military planning force there, which is discussing a future force sent to Ukraine if there is a ceasefire. This is right now, in terms of scenario planning, what is going on at Mont-Valérien. We have learned actually that there is 35 nations now on that base. If the translation was correct, it's probably liaison officers coming from all over Europe and NATO. I believe you still have two main contingents of countries, which is France and the UK, but then you probably have a constellation of countries who are detaching 1-2 officers for that planning. It doesn't mean, again, that Europe is going to send troops in Ukraine, but we are at what we call in the army the CONOPS stage, the concept of operations stage, which is before the planning stage. And obviously, the question that will be asked probably next year is, what do we do if there is no ceasefire and if Ukraine loses more territory? Do we send a force even if there is no ceasefire? This is going to be the question for next year. Number three, the package was interesting, of course, the Rafale, radars, anti-air missiles and missiles. And of course, we discussed this together before, a 10-year relationship. As I told you, this deal is going to lock France with Ukraine over at least a decade. So we have seen with Australia and with AUKUS that countries can decide to unlock themselves from certain military deals. This is what Australia has done with the submarines 5-6 years ago. So it will remain possible for Ukraine or for France to actually cancel this. But honestly, once you start a program like that, there's so many actors at stake, so many billions of euros, so many jobs at stake, that it's very difficult to, at some point in 5 years, 10 years, it's very difficult to say, we cancel this and we do something else. Mm-hmm. So this is, yes, I think we can say that this is a historic decision for France and for Europe that shows that this conflict in Ukraine is more and more dealt by Europeans and less by America.
And they also mentioned some other deals that were signed on energy, defense, but infrastructure. And we heard about a deal with Alstom to help Ukrainians rebuild infrastructure there.
Yes, this is very important. You're right to mention this. Logistics is forgotten. We talk a lot about new technologies and drones and gadgets and AI, but the reality is that approximately half of defense purchasing is about logistics. It's the food, it's the clothing, it's transportation, mobility. And yes, they also mentioned that during that press conference. We have French actors, companies who are very good at this, and this is very good news for Alstom, who will apparently benefit from a grant, from what I understood, from the EIB, the European Investment Bank. Or is it a grant or a loan? It's not really clear. But this is a good signal again for French company, French savoir-faire in terms of infrastructure.
Speaking of French companies, the two leaders are now meeting about drones, and linking the two, Ukrainians and French, in these sectors. What do you see to come out of this meeting? Can the French companies provide Ukraine with the technology that it requires in this moment?
Yeah, this is President Zelensky mentioned co-production, and this is an area where the French have a lot to learn from the Ukrainians. The French are a bit behind the curve in Europe. German companies and British companies and also American companies are ahead of French companies. in terms of market presence and innovation. And so for France, I think this is a way to catch up for lost time. And working with Ukrainians to develop French solutions in terms of drone is very important for France, also, of course, for Ukraine, but for France as well, in the three domains, it seems, especially in the land domain, but also in the naval domain. You now have very strong Ukrainian naval drones, which are very cheap and can be used for other non-conventional operations. That could be very interesting for France as well. Good news for both countries.
All right, Michael Benhamou, thank you very much for your analysis here on France 24.
Thank you.